Hello and welcome to another political dialogue program. Today we have very important guests from Ireland, well-known Irish Sinn Féin politician and member of UK Parliament, Francie Molloy. Dear Francie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Dear Francie, as you know, the wars all over the world still continues, the conflicts still continues, and another conflict is getting deeper in Middle East now. But first of all, I would like to ask you about the Sinn Féin's struggle, first of all. So can you give us a very brief history and struggle of Sinn Féin? How did the Sinn Féin movement develop, first of all?
Well, Sinn Féin is an Irish Republican party. We want to separate from Britain, and the whole idea, we were founded in 1905. The foundation of Sinn Féin was to create separation from England. We then adopted the policy in the 1918 election of not taking our seats in Westminster if we're elected, and to this day we continue to do that. We attend Westminster, but we don't take our seats. We don't take an oath of allegiance to the British Queen. We say that would be contradictory as Irish Republicans to actually to swear an allegiance to a British monarch. So we don't do that. We stay out of Parliament buildings as such. We have an office here, but that's our role. We do everything else that MPs do, but representing our people and representing the constituency. We are a grassroots activist party and our campaigning party on the ground in various different issues in support of different struggles throughout the world. And at the present time, the whole struggle with the Palestinians for to try and bring about ceasefires at the present time. So that's where we come from and our background within that. And we try to portray that across when we're dealing with all the struggles, linking all the struggles together. And every day we are campaigning on different issues. At the present time, say, mobilising in support of the Palestinian cause.
Thank you. Also, as you know, the Kurds has always been a supporter of the Irish people and their struggle as well, and they always take it as an example. So what is the similarities between these two communities, because both of them has been faced a historic suppression? So how would you going to put it in a concept of the similarities of Kurds and Irish people?
I think there are a lot of similarities in campaigning and struggles throughout the world, anti-imperialist struggles that are fighting against the sort of the aggression. And what borders being imposed on Ireland, we had the partition of the country, north and south, on British rule, and 6 counties in the north still remaining under British rule, and we want to break that. So the same where you get into different countries where the power takes partitions the country off, divides it off, creates division within it, and that in itself actually creates division within the people. So part of the whole idea of the British Empire is, whenever they leave a country, they basically leave it in and to divide and conquer, so that they have people fighting between each other as much as anything else. So there is a big connection between two different situations, and the similarities in struggle, and the similarities then that you get in response in that struggle, similarities to the aggression, and the similarly, we believe that we need freedom for our people, and the struggles that we are fighting, the same as the Kurdish struggle, actually of freedom for the people themselves, and to fight the imperialism within that.
Thank you. You make a really clear and very good point about that. And another significant issue is about Mr. Öcalan. And so just to take an example from the Irish people's struggle, the Northern Ireland question has been experienced in Britain for many years, as we know as well. So they reach a peaceful solution and the deaths has been stopped. So similarly, Mr. Öcalan has been calling for a dialogue for years to resolve the Kurdish issue now in a political way in Kurdistan specifically, and for all Middle East. So in the light of your experience, Ireland, what are your suggestions for a peaceful solution to the Kurdish question and Kurdish problem now?
Well, I think Orson is completely right. We actually do need dialogue. One of the things that we insisted on in our discussions prior to the Good Friday Agreement was inclusive dialogue with all the political parties, the two governments, the United States were involved, even people who actually that we maybe didn't align with in a lot of ways, but they played a key role in bringing about the Irish peace process. And whilst we have the Good Friday Agreement and we have a peace process in place, we still actually haven't got freedom. We haven't got freedom for the people in the north of Ireland, and that has to happen. We were promised under the Good Friday Agreement that a referendum would be held to let the people decide what way they wanted to actually, whether they wanted to be United Ireland or they wanted to be remain under British rule. And that 25 years on, that a referendum still hasn't been held. So but the one thing I would say in any struggle with the Kurdish people and with others is that we actually need inclusive dialogue. We need everybody involved. The very fact that prisoners are actually isolated, that they can't communicate, that they can't have contact with their solicitors, can't have contact with their people, can't have contact with their party, means that actually that dialogue between the prisons and the people is lost. And one of the things that we found very important in the peace process and moving things along, the prisoners' actions moved things along on the outside, and their power they actually created inside the prisons was equally as effective as what we were doing outside. So Bobby Sands, for instance, whenever he stood for election and got elected as an MP, that indicated that there was a strong support base on the ground to give him a mandate. And that then changed the course of Irish politics, changed the course of Sinn Féin politics in becoming more involved in the political struggle and moving away from a conflict situation. And that brought about, basically over a few years, that brought about the peace process because we now had an MP elected. And after that, when Bobby unfortunately was allowed to die by the British and by Thatcher particularly, we then moved into the political process where the peace process was involved and we started developing. But all of that was done primarily by Sinn Féin pushing the British government for negotiations, for political dialogue. And we had dialogue, Jerry Adams and John Hume had dialogue between the political parties. So we need to bring more people on board all the time to unlock the situation, to stop the stagnation sometimes, because it's very easy to not engage with your political opponents, but then you need their support. We can't do it on our own, and we have recognised that a long time back, that we can't deliver Irish freedom on our own. We need a broad spectrum of people who actually come to the same line of thinking. So that dialogue with John Hume, the dialogue with Albert Reynolds, the Taoiseach, all those discussions were very important to bring us to the situation where we then got the Good Friday Agreement. So I would say that in any country, what you need is engagement with the political parties, but also engagement with the governments where they will engage. And one of the problems out there is in the same to Iceland's position where he is not allowed to engage. That exactly is contrary to what we actually need to do to bring about a peace process.
Thank you, Francie. Another issue we'd like to talk to you with is the UK's political role as well. As you know, since 1923, which was the Lausanne Treaty, the UK has involved in Middle East to set up even the borders of Kurdistan, which is divided to 4 different countries now. So what role is played by the UK political system in the conflict on Middle East as well as in the Kurdish question as well?
Well, I think one of the problems about the British colonial system is that one is that it divided and conquered. It has actually played a very negative role in the Middle East. When we remember that Tony Blair, when he retired as being a prime minister, one of his roles was to be a sort of an agent around the Middle East to try and bring about Palestinian peace. He had built his career on the Irish peace process. That was one of his successes. And then he was asked to get involved in politics. He has never done anything within that to actually try and forward the Palestinian cause. We haven't heard from him at all in relation to the present conflict. So they have a dividing process. And one of the things that I've said before is they divide and conquer. Dividing your country into four actually means that it's weakening the country itself. It's not allowing the country to develop in its natural way. In the same way in Ireland, dividing it in two meant the same thing. So it divides and conquers. And when you look at even what they're at in the Middle East, like they have give the Israelis a free hand to bomb and to shoot and to murder and pure genocide against the Palestinian people without actually speaking up for them. In fact, not only are they not speaking up for them, they're not even calling for restraint or for a ceasefire or for any human rights issues to be dealt with. They refuse to actually follow the South African lead in taking Israel to the court. So it is actually the problem that around the world, the legacy of British imperialism is that they actually divide. And the same with Palestine. Like they were part of the division there, part of the separation, and part of dividing of the country. And the people who were involved in Ireland in bringing about partition of Ireland, Balfour, and they were the same people who actually then went into Palestine and done the exact same thing. They brought some of the black and tans that had been involved in the conflict in Ireland in the 20s and put them into Palestine and done the same thing, murdering people. So the same in every country they've been in, they have actually been highlighting the role of the British imperialism of actually making sure that the country can't come together, of dividing it. And now if we see in your own country at the moment, what they're dividing in order to conquer, to keep people and to separate people and not let people divide. And the response from the Turkish government has been just to ignore and to isolate and to keep the prisoners outside of the negotiations. Because one of the things that, as I say, that we have found is that the political prisoners can have a deep support-wise, but also good thinking, which actually, when that's generated outside. Same with Mandela in South Africa, when he was in prison and the work that he was doing there, held for a long time. But the inspiration that he actually gave to the people on the outside was very important. So it is important that that isolation is broken down and that prisoners are allowed to communicate with the outside world.
Thank you, Francie. You also mentioned that the British bombs has been bombing the Palestine today, but as we know, as we can clearly see that the British arms trader, the biggest company in Britain, which is BAE Systems, is one of the biggest arms trader to Turkey. And today, what Palestinians facing, Kurds has been facing that last 40 years as well. They bombing the Kurdistan, especially the Rojava, which is self-administration place, and it's an example of the revolution in their self-determination place. So what is your call to UK to stop that conflict, basically, because it's also, as we remember, Kurds has been fight against ISIS as well to stop them and to come to Europe as well. So in that perspective, what would you like to say? Because it's clearly visible that UK has a political role, as you mentioned, via the imperialist ideology of the British state. So how would you like to comment on that very shortly, that one, please?
Well, I think the problem, is that the arms dealers throughout the world need wars. And unfortunately, they create the wars for actually to support the arms manufacturing and the sales of arms. And we have called time and time again for Britain to stop arming the like of the Turkish state, the arming the different countries that are involved in conflicts in the same way as Israel and others today. So that arms trade needs to stop, because that's what, and the US needs to stop supplying Israel and supplying other countries around the world that actually are involved in conflict, because the arms business is selling murder across the world.
Thank you, Francie. Very good point you made. So one of our main topic is Mr. Öcalan, who is still under isolation, and Kurds believe that with the Mr. Öcalan's freedom, there will be political solution for the Kurdish question. So they're running a campaign since 10th of October, which is a global campaign, which is called Freedom for Öcalan, Political Solution for Kurdish Question. So how important do you think this campaign for you and this new era for the Kurds? Very shortly.
Well, I think it is very important, and Arslan's campaign is very important that it gets support and that prisoners, as I say, are involved in the scale, because that's where the whole scale around the development, because prisoners are thinking ways and solutions. And as we find, I was director of elections for Bobby Sands, and his campaign electing him as an MP was very important on the hunger strike. The hunger strike that they were involved in, the British might have thought they were winning it, but in fact, that changed the whole face of Irish politics. In the same way as Arslan, actually, if he was to actually to be released and to build that political struggle out, that's why they won't release him. That's why they keep him in isolation, because his importance in actually forwarding the struggle and leading the struggle on the outside would be so important, actually developing a peace process with the Kurdish people. But the Turkish government need to respond positively. They need to be the people who actually are engaging and trying to find a solution, instead of just actually putting people in prison and isolating people and murdering people.
Thank you, Francie. As you mentioned, as you underlined, Mr. Öcalan is one of the sides that looking for peace and dialogue, but the isolation still continues. Just to underline the isolation issue, as you know, the Europe and its institutions such as European Council, European Parliament, as well as the CPT, which is the prevention of the torture. As you know, isolation is one of the worst torture, but when it comes to the human rights and the international law and democracy, European institutions sell themselves very well. But when it comes to the Kurds and Mr. Öcalan, there is no any action from them. So do you think this is a double standard? And what is your call very shortly to break this isolation, to break this breach of human rights of Öcalan, and let him see his lawyers as a human rights at least?
Well, certainly I think Arslan's campaign to end the isolation, it should be supported by all countries and by freedom-loving people across the world. The human rights challenges need to be brought to the European Court because, again, it's in a similar line as we have in other countries. We also need to have the opportunity of highlighting what is happening there, the human rights abuses that are happening to him and to other prisoners, and the very fact that people are, as you say, have been kept in the worst conditions that you actually find. I remember actually visiting Raid Farrell in Armagh prison, and the whole issue that a woman coming in prison and the conditions that I found were horrific when I walked into it. She was living in them all the time and actually seemed to be able to cope with it better. And your mind is the strongest, as she actually said at that particular time, your mind is the strongest sort of weapon that you actually have. And the same way as the prisoners in the past in Ireland, their body was the strongest weapon they actually had. The hunger strike became the ultimate weapon that they actually had to actually try and force change. And unfortunately, what we need to get is to move Arslan's case onto the international stage in order to get recognition of that and recognition of what actually has happened with the Kurdish people.
Thank you, Francie. Also, would like to ask you how important is the solution for Kurdish question, which should be the political solution for the region and for the whole world, because it's one of the deepest conflict in the Middle East. So, how important is to solve this issue? What is the importance of a political solution for the Kurdish question? Very shortly, that one, please. We have limited time, and I have one more question for you.
Okay, well, I think the Kurdish question is a key international sign of injustice, and what we actually have to do is to move it onto the international stage to deal with the human rights abuses within it, and to actually make sure that it is on the international stage, that it is brought to the public through, and that generally within the European Union, with other bodies, we actually to try and make the case for to resolve that problem. It's one of those international issues that actually have to be dealt with, because until everyone has their freedom and where prisoners are released, then none of us are free.
Thank you, Francie. Lastly, very shortly, very briefly, we already mentioned the political solution for Kurdish question, but Kurds are also related this issue for freedom for Öcalan. So what do you think about Abdullah Öcalan's ideas for bringing peace to the Middle East, as he is supporting the democratic confederalism, which is makes all the citizens or all the communities equal? So do you think his ideas are valuable to bring peace, first of all? And what is your call to end the isolation and free Öcalan very shortly?
Well, certainly, I think his ideas and his thinking around it is very important, and that is broadcast around the world. In Belfast, we have what we call the International Wall, where Öcalan's case, along with the Palestinians and along with other conflicts around the world, are highlighted there on the Falls Road on that wall, which is an international wall, but it's also a peace wall, where it's actually looking to highlight the different cases around the world where conflict is happening, and to try and do that depicts the conflict and what has actually happened, and for actually to try and do the peace wall, is our way of actually dealing with those difficult situations. And one of the things, the wording on this, peace is more difficult than war. We're not scared, and we resisted the war. We will not be scared, and we will make peace. And I think making the peace and getting the voice out there to make peace and getting support across the world for that. And no, the problem is that both the Irish people understand your problem and your situation and how to move it onto the world stage. We're lucky that we actually got it internationalised at that particular time, but it needs to be challenging what the US is doing, what the British are doing, and what the international community are doing for to try and resolve conflict situations like this.
Well-known Irish Sinn Féin politician and member of UK Parliament, dear Francie Molloy, thanks for joining us, and thank you for your valuable comments today.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you. We have came to another end of the political dialogue program. We had today very important guest, Irish MP Francie Molloy. We talked about isolation on Öcalan and political solution for the Kurdish question. We will see you on political dialogue program.